I'm Steve Brule with Studio Brule, and I'm here with 4 Liberty Bells from London, England. And we're here to discuss the events of the past week in London and related events that happened around the world. And one of the most kind of shocking ones just in the past few days was the news of a woman who stabbed her boyfriend and is now holidaying in Greece with her mother, and is not receiving a jail sentence for this. And Catherine, I think you have a little information on that, right?
Yeah, well, this girl, she's a student at Oxford University. I think she's a medical student or something like that. And she's got some kind of drug problem as well. She stabbed her boyfriend. And the judge has seen fit not to send her to jail because she is an extraordinary student and her college have agreed to allow her back to complete her studies, and a jail sentence would harm her career. And I guess maybe that may be the right way to treat somebody in that situation. However, it's just the hypocrisy of where are the protesters? If you compare it to a story that happened a while ago, where the president of the Oxford Union, a male guy, I think he basically had drunk sex with someone who then accused him of rape. And the whole world was supposed to withdraw from debates at the Oxford Union. His name was dragged through the mud. They didn't think that he should be allowed to stay at university because he would have made it an unsafe space. All of this kind of thing. And where are the protesters? And it specifically talks about how the man involved can't be named because he is a victim of domestic violence. Where are the domestic violence protesters in this case at Oxford University?
Is anybody surprised by this on this panel?
I'm surprised by how dramatic it is, to be honest. I'm quite naive, despite myself, despite my experience. I'm always surprised.
It's a similar thing that's going on right around the world, that there seems to be a press within our culture to make women immune to any consequences of the criminal law. And in fact, there was a movement we talked about, I think, a year ago or so, trying to close all women's prisons and turn them into men's prisons.
In the UK, every few months, you'll open a newspaper and there will be some kind of campaign, some new politician or a politician's wife or somebody saying we need to stop putting women in jail for any reason. We need to close women's jails. We need to keep them in the community. It's an idea that just keeps coming up and coming up and coming up.
Yeah.
Is it taken seriously by politicians?
Not really, because if you look at the stats, actually women are much less likely to be put in jail for committing the same crime as a man. Women's jails are the number of women in these prisons is so small. And I think, when you do hear about these, occasionally there are these terrible stories of women doing terrible things. And I don't think the British public certainly would have any time for not putting Myra Hindley in jail or things like that. But they don't need.
Yeah, but they do have privileges.
Oh, of course, and they're much more likely to be, released from jail because they have, responsibilities with childcare and that kind of thing. But I think all these articles about, stop sending women to jail. It's not about closing women's prisons. It's just about chipping away at this idea that everyone needs to stand equal before the law. It's just about planting that seed and reinforcing it in people's minds that women have it so much worse, and the system is so stacked against them that they need to be treated more leniently. Even though all the stats imply that the absolute opposite is true, women's activists will still stand there and say that women are treated so much more unfairly than men by the criminal justice system, which is not true.
Anybody else have an opinion on that? We haven't heard from Natoya or Paula.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I just echo. How far are we going to go? Are we going to go, get to the point where women are not allowed, won't be held accountable for any crime they commit whatsoever, and it will only be men? That's obviously a bit dramatic, but that's how I feel about it sometimes. I'd be quite interested to know what her partner the guy that she stabbed thinks about this. And he's probably, as you said, he's not allowed to speak out about it because he was a victim, and we don't know. We're not allowed to know who he is.
Well, no, he can break
so-
anonymity if he so desires, can't he?
Yeah. I wonder if he will.
It would
That
be good, wouldn't it?
You know,
Yeah.
it would be very interesting. It does remind me actually of a story that I heard this week where a guy was falsely accused of sexual assault, but he was accused by the young girl's auntie, and it wasn't actually the young girl in question who accused him or reported it to the police, but the police in the UK have powers where if the victim doesn't necessarily want to go ahead with it, they can go ahead of it on their behalf. And we have to remember that when we read these stories sometimes, that the police have the power to do that, even though this girl has said that the man accused is completely innocent.
The Ched Evans case as well. The woman involved in that they were both victims of the Crown Prosecution Service. She went to report a bag stolen, and they want to convict footballers of sexual assault. And also there was a case a few years ago of a man who was he had some kind of learning difficulty, and an underage girl approached him, and she basically committed sexual acts on him. And someone else reported it, and because of her age, he was found guilty, but he received kind of a low sentence. And the activists went crazy. They went absolutely crazy because the judge acknowledged that the underage girl had acted as a predator. She had been the one that had instigated it, but just for the judge even to acknowledge that, even though she wasn't a complainant, it was seen as victim blaming. So
yeah, I think it's difficult. I try not to kind of have a reactionary response to kind of these things that you read in the news. But I mean, the most kind of I think disturbing thing is that someone stabbing someone isn't a casual act, is it? It's not the same as pushing them or hitting them. That's a serious thing, stabbing someone. And I think that you have to seriously kind of ask, what kind of a person does that, and are there and should.
And she is a drug addict as well, it looks like. And for this Oxford College to say that they'll have her back, imagine if they were saying that a drug addicted man who had stabbed women. I mean, I think there's actually a case that would create an unsafe environment for women.
Well, I mean, maybe it's what kind of what Erin Pizzey's kind of always kind of said, that the most kind of squalid kind of domestic violence takes place in really bad relationships where people are mutually abusing one another, or are vulnerable to kind of just living on the edge themselves, and so that those kind of relationships they seek each other out and they kind of validate each other. I haven't actually read it, so yeah, I don't know. Seems really quite extreme, just that anybody, male or female, would stick a knife in another human being and not be imprisoned for that. That's quite strange.
What is she studying at university?
Medicine.
Be a doctor.
Maybe she just wanted to kind of practice her
research field.
Yeah.
But
doesn't she need to pass a criminal records check to do that role?
So the article talks about how when she does eventually qualify as a doctor, I think the medical council, she would have to declare the criminal record, and they would have to make a decision about that.
Right.
But they're with a medical degree from.
Imagine. Sorry, go on.
A medical degree from Oxford will qualify you to do you. It would probably give you many career options.
You wouldn't want her as your GP, would you?
Don't want to make her angry, that's for sure.
Exactly.
This is what's called the pussy pass, isn't it? And as all of us are ladies with pussies, you know, it's a bittersweet burden that we have.
Are you assuming their
No.
genders here?
We all know
had
each other intimately. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to point these things out.
I guess there's another aspect to this which I think you guys know that I pay attention to, and there is a class aspect, I think, especially in the UK. She's studying at Cambridge.
Well, her name
She's
Lavinia. What's her name? Lavinia Woodward.
Oh wow, yeah.
I don't know. I could be wrong, but it doesn't sound very right.
Actually, doesn't it remind
No,
you
it
of
sounds
the
middle class to me.
what was the rape case where the guy raped a hipster and the judge didn't let him go to prison because he had a, you know, it was a one-off event, and Brock Taylor. It sounds it's kind of, so it might. I mean,
that case isn't exactly similar because the circumstances of that case are very odd and unusual. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance in that case, but there's no nuance in this case. She took a knife and stabbed him in the leg. There's not much nuance there.
Aspect, Natty, when you're talking about class, and this is that I read somewhere that actually sort of more beautiful and feminine women are charged more leniently than more masculine or unattractive women. And this girl is quite hot, isn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, that covers across all sexes. Attractive people get better treatment of everybody.
That's true, and males as well. In fact, I read a study many years ago that tall men have more successful careers than shorter men. Corrected for everything else, height is an indicator of your success in your career.
Yeah. Apart from Tom Cruise.
Well, there's obviously a
yeah, he wears lifts. Oh, I'll never work with Tom again. Oh.
Guys, I know Elizabeth has to go in 15 minutes, so are there any topics that you want to talk about, Elizabeth?
Yeah, well, I'd really like to hear from Paula, because Paula went for a recce yesterday, because we've just found out about this sort of initiative called Men's Sheds, which are like community-run organisations, a space for men to get together and learn skills and learn from each other and have a good time and get advice and stuff like that. And it's an idea that's come over from Australia, and there's now, if you go to their website, there's all across the UK. And yeah, Paula went to visit one, so do you want to give us the lowdown on what they're like?
Yeah, I went to visit Bladen Men's Shed, which is in Gateshead in the northeast of England. I think there's another 2 men's sheds in the northeast in Newcastle. And basically what they're doing is, like Elizabeth said, they're inspired from an idea from Australia about kind of men's, creating kind of men's spaces for men to hang out. And also just for men who, don't drink, don't want, or, might want to get away and avoid drinking even, or they're not really into sports. It's kind of like a youth club, but for kind of grown. And I went down there, and it's run by a lady called Fiona. I can't remember her surname. Teasdale, yes. And she set it up, and they've been in situ now for about a year in a church hall. They've got quite a good space. They've got 2 gardens. They've got about 3 rooms. They've got a workshop, and one of the guys there is a retired carpenter, so he's kind of teaching a lot of the younger guys kind of skills in that kind of. They've got lots of activities that they kind of do. There's, like I say, there's a garden where they're kind of planting and growing stuff. There's going to be a computer room. they've rented the space from the local church hall for a year on a peppercorn rent of about £1, but their rent is going to go up in July, I think, to £150. So that's actually they're fundraising. Steve, I've sent you the link, the GoFundMe link, if we could put it down in the comments below. And yeah, so they're just really desperate
Paula,
for kind
where
of
is that link? Oh, okay.
I sent it to you, and yeah.
Yeah, I'll put that right in the comments now.
And yeah, it's just a place for kind of guys to go and hang out away from us harpies.
Good.
Yeah.
No, but
it's interesting
and
that
really
a woman started this shed that you mentioned there.
Yeah.
The shed programs were started by men in Australia. You mentioned, right? But this is the first one in Britain, and it's started by a British woman.
Oh no, it's not the first one in Britain. There are sheds. There's a massive network down in London, I think. This is just kind of a local one. This one. I think they're all because they're on a charitable basis, and the church is now going to start to charge kind of to fundraise, basically, just to cover the costs of the rent and the building kind of maintenance and bills and things like that, just to keep the place open. So it's I think there's a kind of core group of about 30 men who go there. They're not there all of the time. Publicize that it's not just for kind of retired men, it's for men of all ages and young men, and yeah, just a kind of free space for them to go and chill. So it's a really good idea, and everybody was really friendly and really lovely there.
Yeah, everybody should go and check out the Men's Sheds website as well, which is, if you just put Men's Sheds into Google, it'll come up straight away, I'm sure. But they are everywhere.
You might find one. Yeah, I think there's a big network all over the UK. You'll find one near you.
And do they support people who want to start up a shed in their neighborhood? Do they have any kind of sort of networking support?
I think in London they do. There's no kind of supportive network up here at the minute, Fiona was saying, because everything's just, I think she was saying maybe a couple of the other sheds are in a bit of financial trouble. So they're all just kind of fighting for survival up here, I think. But certainly down south, the community, they're much more kind of linked as a community there. So I guess they're going to be supporting each other as well.
And Paula, did you ask her any questions about some of the experiences the men might talk about or have had? Did she give you any examples?
I don't think I could mention them though, without kind of
something theoretical
kind of disclosure of. Well, I'm actually thinking about, certainly based on some of the things she did say, I'm thinking about setting up a kind of experiment on social media, let's just say, but I don't want to mention particularly what it's about, because I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, because I'll bluff kind of thing. But yeah, you'll have to wait and see. But a lot of the guys there, you know, that some of them aren't very confident, and they you know, it's hard. I mean, it was hard for me. It's hard for anybody to walk into a room full of strangers that you don't know and just go, hello, my name's Paula, I'm here to, and of course, I've got an excuse to go and do that. I'm kind of like, oh, I'm one of the Liberty Bells. I kind of want to, but it's still hard. It's hard even for the most confident of people, I think, to just walk into a room full of strangers. So,
Sorry, I think that would be a good place for you to go and do like a video interview sort of thing, a little episode, if you're up to it.
I think, yeah, I did talk to them about that. Some of them they're not really very confident at the minute about appearing on camera, but we'll see how it goes, because I mean, they do one thing for ladies. They do ladies DIY, and I'm going to go along to that, because I need to learn a bit of DIY. So I'm going to go along to that once a week and keep in touch with everybody and see how it goes. And hopefully maybe we might get some content there in the future.
Certainly. And for any viewers who are not familiar with the Men's Shed, I think it was started up on the basis that men tend to bond and socialize around activities like building something. And that was sort of the philosophy behind the Men's Shed. And while typically, that's my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Paula, but they apparently during the process of building or during an activity, men will often talk about a lot of stuff that they might not talk about otherwise. And just sitting down, men typically don't like to just sit down and spill their guts out.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, I think the one of the catchphrases is men don't talk eye to eye; they talk shoulder to shoulder.
That's a good catchphrase.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we move on to another topic here? One I see in the list that Elizabeth brought up. So it's interesting about the EU Parliament ignoring men. And an article in Psychology Today.
What's new?
Yeah, really good article by, is it Robert Whiteley who's written that? And he's talking about this report by the European Parliament's Committee for Women's Rights and Gender Equality, which is called Promoting Gender Equality in Mental Health and Clinical Research. And its recommendations were adopted by our Parliament back in February. But he ignores men. Only 2 paragraphs out of 163 are dedicated to men, and women and girls are mentioned 217 times, men and boys only 45, and that includes vulnerable male subpopulations such as gay men, who have some of the highest suicide and self-harm rates in Europe, while it does pay special attention to lesbians, bi and trans people. Now, the recommendations include that all women and girls should have access to screenings and free access to services for unemployed women, and access to mental health services, including women's shelters. Makes absolutely no reference to men having any of these things. And it's really bizarrely ideological as well. So they blame the high rates of on masculinity, which may encourage suppression of emotions or resort to anger. And they blame mental illness in women on men too, saying that men do not devote themselves sufficiently to household tasks and bringing up daughters and sons, causing many women to suffer from depression, anxiety, and stress.
Obviously, the slaves aren't working hard enough. You have to whip them some more. As the saying goes, the beatings will continue until morale improves.
I have a something that pissed me off a little bit in that. This idea when they're criticizing masculinity, that it's only men that get angry. And as we just displayed earlier when we were talking about the Lavinia Woodward, who got charged for stabbing her boyfriend in the leg, well, she got quite angry and stabbed her boyfriend in the leg, and now she's been let off. So the message here is, it's okay when women get angry because it's not their fault, but when men get angry, it's their fault because of their masculinity, and they're only masculine because they're male. So again, it's the same message being communicated, get out there. But on a little side note, this kind of attitude really grinds my gears a little bit, because there does seem to be a suppression of kind of genuine anger in society, in our culture and society, which is very feminized and, well, feministized even, where displaying that, you know, any real raw emotion, at least in a controlled way, it's just looked down upon. Because, you know, when I mentioned earlier about this woman being of a middle class, and you know, maybe she was, so therefore she can get away with it. Well, you know, I'm sure that if she was working class and she's displaying her anger in that way, then that's seen as something that is uncontrollable and violent, and we must stamp it out. And it just kind of falls into what Belinda says about feminism, which is that it's an elite ideology for elite women to suppress everyone else, including working class women. I mean, they fall for it too, but they're not on the grand scale of things. They get stood on too if because they like to display their anger out, you know, in a less passive aggressive and kind of neutralized manner. And this document is just displaying what pisses me off all the time when I'm out and about and I hear people saying these things like, "Oh, you're so angry," or "that person's angry," and it's like, yeah, but what's wrong with anger? So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
And the most important thing about this type of legislation to me is that it's supposed to be equality legislation. That's what they're calling it. But the dangers of this ideology, and when you're educating people in it and steeping them in it and not giving them any alternative to it, all equality means to them is that women have been so oppressed. All equality can ever be to them is making things better for women. That's all it means. And I think this particular document, which again, this isn't just some whack job, you know, feminist lecturer. This is it's EU legislation. It's been adopted by the UK Parliament. This is, you know, reaching the highest levels of legislation and policy, and it's completely biased and it's completely wrong. And because they can slap the word equality on it, even though that is not, with all the ideological gymnastics, all that means is helping women, and that's so dangerous. And people need to know about that.
I think it's important that I think Roy Baumeister calls it the women are wonderful effect, the wow effect. He's written about that in a few essays, and he's written a great book called "Is There Anything Good About Men?" And the title is ironic. It's not. It doesn't actually mean that. But as you know, I've just kind of looked at a lot of studies on female aggression, and one of the there's strong evidence that women and men in intimate partnerships in the West, you know, use aggressive acts with the same frequency. Now, the reasons for that might be very complicated, but it does need to be explained, and it shouldn't be explained away by feminists and patriarchy theory in a kind of roundabout way, saying if women are violent, then it's the patriarchy's fault. Again, there are reasons women are violent, and as I've talked to the girls before, that it very, very well could be linked to oxytocin in intimate dyads. It's a complicated thing, but I'm going to write something on it. But certainly, we should fight with every bit we have about to stop feminists writing feminist theory into kind of law and legislation. That's really dangerous kind of
definitely. And patriarchy has become sort of the rubber stamp, get out of jail free, explain everything as men's fault sort of idea.
Well, it's just another flying spaghetti monster in the sky. It's nothing. It's a fantasy.
I just want to give Elizabeth a chance because you have to go right away, pretty much, Elizabeth, right?
I have to go right away. Yeah, and I don't have anything more to add to that. I think everybody's kind of, you know, it speaks for itself, really. Mm-hmm. But just before I go, I would like to wish the best of luck to Bobby Smith, who is a father's rights campaign father's rights campaigner who runs a campaign called Give Me Back Elmo, and he's standing against Theresa May in her Maidenhead constituency. Elmo. So
can
best
you
of luck
explain that his stand? You shared a video, and I'll put the link in the chat. But can you explain a little bit about his stand against Theresa May? What his issues are?
Yeah, he wants to reform family law, basically, because he has not seen his children for 4 years and has barely seen them for 7 years. And he's witnessed firsthand the bias in family courts, and he's aware as well that there are also women who are being separated from their children by evil family courts, he calls them, which I think is quite fair. Just wants to raise awareness, basically. And I guess this is the most high-profile seat.
Pretty high profile. What they say in Texas, go big or go home.
Mm. But yeah, I must go. So
Okay, thank you very much,
do
Elizabeth.
talk about Lois Rogers, everybody.
Lois
Yeah?
Rogers.
Yeah, and the circumcision assault.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
lawsuit, right?
Yeah, I can talk about that.
Love you all. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so the circumcision story. Have we got the link? Have you put the link in the chat?
I'm putting it in there right now. It's a lawsuit, right?
Yeah, this is actually quite groundbreaking. So a mother in Nottingham, she had a relationship with another guy, and they had a son, and they split up. They didn't stay together, and the son had shared custody between the parents. And one day, he went over to his father's house, and his grandmother or his father must have called her and said, "Oh, when he comes home, he's going to be a bit sore." And then she's like, "What do you mean he's going to be a bit sore?" And they were like, "Yeah, he's had a circumcision." And so the mother's like, wait, you've given my son a circumcision. When did you talk to me about this? And so now this case has been brought forward because she went to the police and said, my son was given a circumcision without my consent. I would like the doctor and possibly the father, but I think in this lawsuit is about the doctor to be charged because this shouldn't have been done to him. This has been going on a while, and it's actually if it happens, it would set a precedent for other cases of similar nature for this to go through. I don't know if any of you guys have read the article and are aware of it.
Look at it. Do you know? I don't see in here whether the custody was equal between mother and father, or
yeah, don't quote me about whether they had a family court agreement or not, but I know that he had visitation. Both his parents were in his life, and he would go and see his dad and his mom. Like they looked after him on a 50-50 basis. Yeah, more or less.
Right. It says here in the article, I'll just quote this, which is a bit odd to me. I'm reading it here, and I don't believe it's like this. It says here, it is for society to decide what limits should be imposed on parental choice.
Isn't that the current? Aren't they talking about the current guideline?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're implying that society can override a parent's wish to not circumcise their children.
I don't think that's what they were saying. Let me just. I don't.
I'm not saying that explicitly, but by quoting this quote, it's implying that it's not necessarily a parent's decision.
Well, I think there's two issues here. One is the circumcision was done without her consent,
Right.
and however we feel about circumcision, whether we believe it's morally okay or we should think it should be banned on infant baby boys, that aspect of it is extremely important because the child's just been taken away, and that's happened. So that's one aspect. And then the second, as what's mentioned in the article, is the growing backlash, as one of the campaigners, Timothy, has said, against circumcision for young baby boys because of the issue of consent, because they themselves cannot give consent because they're baby boys. And this conversation hasn't really happened yet here, and I'm sure in America it's nowhere near happening really. But this could be really interesting. It could open it up. I know the BBC's picked up on this story. So
can I just clarify what you were talking about, Steve? That the quote is that it's the British Medical Association guidelines currently say it is for society to decide what limits should be imposed on parental choice. So what I think they're saying is that parents can't just do whatever they want to children. Society has to reach a consensus about what is and is not acceptable. At the moment, society believes that infant male circumcision in some case, is acceptable. And the BMA are now reviewing those guidelines. So I think what's important is if they were to change that opinion, those guidelines, because that would be in line with what is happening in some other countries in Europe. And I think that would be a really important step to getting rid of infant male circumcision in this country, which would be great.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's a tricky issue in this case, because you've got obviously a father who wants circumcision, a mother who doesn't, and a law that is a bit ambiguous on the whole situation.
I think what's important here is because the word assault is being used, if the judge finds that, yes, it was an assault, then I guess the argument is going to be, well, hang on a minute, if that's an assault on a child, why does the parents' consent make a difference? If it's an assault, it's an assault.
Yeah.
Which of course it absolutely is.
That is a good point. If they win that case, I would assume that it would compel the law to be changed completely so that no one can do a circumcision.
Well, it will set a precedent, definitely, which we'll be able to fight from.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, there's another thing on here. If nobody has any more to say on that one, we have just ask you, what do you think about this Miss USA, non-feminist Miss USA? Are you familiar with this one?
Yeah, I think it's great. Let's just, my opinion is, let's just hope she doesn't capitulate.
Yeah, that's my worry.
Yeah.
I didn't hear what you said, Catherine. What was that?
To me, I think there's so many intelligent, high-achieving women that are saying this stuff. And for me, the interesting question here is going to be whether or not she capitulates.
Yeah.
And let's just pray for her. Let's pray for Miss USA.
That's my worry as well. She'll come under such intense pressure to just retract that.
That statement.
Now we'll see. We'll see.
They haven't withdrawn her crown yet, right?
Yeah.
Have they? They might.
Well, it doesn't make sense to me that they would ask them that question when feminists have been campaigning against Miss World as a pageant for a long time. So feminists are the contestants' enemy, or at least high profile, a certain level, a group of feminists have been anyway. So
yeah,
it didn't make sense to me when they asked that question. I know that it's politically correct now, but her answer made sense to me.
I think that's about them trying to lose that nasty sort of, Donald Trump image. I think they want to present themselves as feminists. That's probably why they're trying to co-opt it, as a lot of institutions or individuals do when feminists come after them. They're like, okay, let's be feminists then. No.
Well, this is a big event in a sense that on events like this that are of national, say, interest, not by the government, but by people who are interested in these pageants, for a woman to come out and state something so openly, this is I think a first, really.
Yeah. Well, the Miss USA is fundamentally a representative, isn't she? She goes around the world. She's an ambassador for the US. You can't have someone who is an ambassador for the US who is a capitalist hating, US hating, Trump hating, person. How can they possibly be an ambassador for the States if they hate the States? She's embodying everything that she should do.
Yeah.
A perfect job.
Yeah. Although she's kind of she's pressing the limits with sort of her empowered woman. Really, she's an empowered woman, and feminism is all about disempowering women. Really.
Well, exactly, and the fact is she's got brains and beauty. My God, she must be driving them nuts.
But not just that, but she contradicts their narrative, because she's a woman of colour who's done well in a STEM field and who doesn't feel that she is discriminated against.
Mm-hmm.
So she is a big threat to their narrative because she proves them wrong. So she is their worst nightmare. She really, really is.
Mm.
Absolutely, she's the whole package.
Did you see? I didn't investigate this very deeply, but I saw some tweets to the extent that Lacey Green is coming out at red pilled or something. Anybody know anything about that?
I think she's. Well, I don't think she's been red pilled. I think she said she's open to a dialogue with. Yeah.
I jokingly suggested that we should talk to her, but maybe we're not well known enough. You know, does she want to speak to real everyday women who are anti-feminists, or does she just want to speak to, you know, the kind of online celebrities who are anti-feminist?
I don't know. I saw Kathy Young tweeted us some ideas, and so I kind of jumped on that again and said, "No, come and speak to us."
Well, Lacey Green is pretty superficial, really, a lightweight, but she appeals to the how to put on your makeup crowd, which is far more popular than anybody who has something important to say.
What interested me though about her video was she actually admitted that the way that her side of the argument are behaving they're not doing themselves any favors. And I wrote, when Donald Trump won the election, I wrote this article, part of me was like, Donald Trump has won. These people are going to realize that screaming racist, sexist, misogynist is making things worse. And so far, she's one of the only people that has realized that. I was expecting a lot of them to actually realize that they needed to change their behavior. I don't think she's really changed her views about how the world works, but I do think she's realized that she and her, you know, the people on her side of the argument are coming out of it as the bad guys, and I think she's just trying to experiment with that. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I think there's been some talk. Those who are probably, you know, really did mistrust her. They think that she's been on the dating market and hasn't found anyone, and therefore now she's coming back. She's trying to make herself a little bit more interesting, because we want to date Lindsay Green. But I'm sure someone does, but maybe not.
That must be true, because the operational sex ratio amongst liberals must be quite drastic. You know, women are attracted to men who are more intelligent than them, who do better than them, who are, you know, and feminists are committed to wiping that out. So in that kind of community, if all you can find are men who have not been to university because they're all dropping out, they're not interested in having discussions about, you know, there's that great Onion parody at the minute about the guy who's sitting there going, I voted for Donald Trump, but I regret that now, having read 300 pages of post-feminist patriarchy theory. But yeah, they're kind of they're creating a kind of black hole for themselves, and even though they're trying to kind of what they're going to quickly discover is, you know, we're a sexually reproducing species, and you can't erase that. That's always going to be the bottom line for everybody. So yeah.
Terrific. Well, we're into 45 minutes. We can wind down and sign off shortly. I just might want to if you have anything else to say, to comment on, maybe you could do that now. If not, I'd like to know what you think about Morgan. I saw a little video on Morgan Freeman talking about that there's no racism, discrimination, or barriers to success for anyone in the U.S., which, for someone like his sort of stature to come out and say such a thing, it's notable, and it completely counter cultural narrative. What do you think on that, if you have nothing else to talk about?
I quite like Black YouTube. I listen to Black YouTube quite a lot, as in lots of people who are Black and make videos on YouTube. But they all call it Black YouTube, so it's fine.
Well, you're a bit Black, so you're all right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a quarter
And
Black.
I haven't checked out what they have to say about it yet, but I know there'll be a few people clapping because Morgan Freeman's status by playing the victim role or sticking on the civil rights movement in the 60s, you know, he's beyond that. He plays God in all his films all the time. His voice is used as God's voice all the time. So, you know, for him to say that they've kept us Black people down and we haven't got anywhere in Hollywood, and the fact that he plays God's voice, it would just be a complete oxymoron. So, you know, he kind of, at this point, he wouldn't be able to say that. If he did, he would just credibility from everyone, even those that disagree with him, because he's proof. And I think it's a shame. I just don't think he would be saying it so outrightly if he wasn't just about to retire. That's how cynical I am about it.
Well,
I think all the people,
certainly a counter narrative to the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S., which is supported by mainstream culture. It seems mostly supported, and Morgan Freeman, being a successful Black man in the U.S., completely cuts the feet out from under that in a space of a 1-minute video.
Mm-hmm. All of the people coming out as conservatives, they're all of a certain age. They've all got, you know, cast iron careers behind them. You know, Clint Eastwood, Morgan Freeman, John Voight. They're all of a certain age. Younger people, you know. What happened to Chris Pratt when he recently, when he just made an offhand comment and then he was kind of forced to be contrite, and you know, his career would be over. If so the young people are basically they don't pass what kind of Nathan Sharansky, who's a kind of Russian dissident who kind of escaped from Stalin, you know, from the gulags. They don't pass what he calls the town square test, where you can go out in the town square basically and say anything, say your views and not be punished for it in some way that, you know, really kind of hurts you. Hollywood doesn't pass that test. You know, universities in the US and in Canada don't pass that test anymore. So that's a bit dangerous. Yeah. Yeah,
definitely. That's a very good point. I'd never heard of that test, but it's quite a useful thought experiment.
It's from a book from Nathan Sharansky called The Case for Democracy. It's a very good book, short book, very good book.
Anybody else have a comment on Morgan Freeman and the Black Lives Matter movement and all the rest of that? No?
I just hope that this opens opens it up for other younger black actors and actresses and people, pundits and influential people, to start freely saying that they do not support Black Lives Matter, or they're not necessarily Democrats and they're more conservative, or just calling out the left on their bullshit. I'd be so happy if that happened.
Have you ever heard of
one of the things that really confuses me about African Americans, the most capitalist people I've ever met. They really want to do well and make a profit. They don't have any problems with that. That whole feeling about feeling guilty about making money and being more capitalist, that's a completely white thing. That's not a black thing. So when they keep their acts and then people in the public sphere, all of the hip hop community and stuff, they're all dissing Donald Trump, whereas about 10 years ago they were all saying how great he was because he was an example of a man who made himself lots of money for being a good businessman. that's always really baffled me. And when people start speaking out and being less hypocritical about it, then I think that will show that the community is going forward in terms of how they projected themselves out into the world to everyone else. That's just something I've thought about. It's really inconsistent what they seem to value and what actually seems to be projected.
I think Catherine has to go. Thank you for those comments, Natoya. Catherine has to
Yeah,
slip
sorry
out.
guys, thank you so much.
Thanks, Catherine, for joining us.
See you later.
next
All
week.
right, bye.
Bye.
Now, just as
There's
I'm
two of us
continuing
left.
that thought, what do you think, or do you know of an example of a high-profile woman saying a similar thing about this not being discriminated against today, as Morgan Freeman said in reference to minorities? Have you heard of a high-profile woman saying that? And what was the response, do you think?
Well, I was in the supermarket yesterday, and I don't buy any newspapers, but I saw something on the front page about Goldie Hawn saying, "Shock horror, Goldie Hawn forgives horny men." That was the headline, and I kind of managed to get a glance at the text, and it was kind of, she was saying something about, I wouldn't want to have testosterone running through my veins, all the attention I had when I was young and beautiful and stuff like that, it's no big deal. It's just kind of what it's the natural kind of course of things and what happens. So I don't know what the backlash. I mean, again, but she's a woman of a certain age with a career that you can't touch anymore. So
exactly.
So yeah, well, I've just done, Steve.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What was that?
Carry on, Natoya. I've just got something. I've just added something in chat, Steve, to talk to you about just a sec before we log off.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say we had Anne Widdecombe, who is a retired MP, a politician over here.
Yeah, she
spoke out recently on television, and she said that she told us a story. In fact, Philip Davies told us a story when we interviewed him, but she did actually say this on TV as well, where she said that when she's met with women who have been in the House, which is kind of like the White House in America, in the Parliament, and they've been battered by someone else who's out to, who they've lost the debate and they're crying. So she went up to this woman and said to her, you didn't lose because you were a woman, you lost because you were rubbish. So pull your bootstraps up and stop thinking about victimizing yourself and thinking it's because you're a woman. It's because you weren't very good and it just so happened your opponent was a male. So she feels she obviously is speaking out now against this victim culture that feminists have promoted. And again, the other thing she has in common is that she's retired and she no longer needs to be she's no longer an MP, so she can freely speak. I think it's a trend going on here, a pattern.
No, it's definitely a pattern, and
can't speak freely at all.
It's definitely a pattern. It's a pattern that everybody in some way or other in our culture suffers from, both women and men, for different reasons. I know of young men who, for instance, I'm never getting back into my old career. I'm beyond that, so I don't have to worry if some prospective employer looks at my channel and decides, oh, he hates women. Well, I don't, but that's sort of the non-stop feminist accusation for trying to shame men, and it actually results in men not getting jobs or getting fired. So young men, even in technical careers that I've spoken to, are very, very concerned about that, and they like seeing this material coming up in the other people's voices, but they won't say a word themselves because they know their career is done and they've got 30-some years ahead of them.
Yeah, well, just that link that I put into the sidebar there, if you could, that's to a TV program. It's on YouTube. I hope it's the right one anyway. About a guy who isn't at the pinnacle of his career. He's called Andrew Lawrence, and he's a comedian in the UK. And he came out as conservative and anti-feminist and anti all of that crap. And his career has been absolutely decimated. The documentary, the link I've just put up there, is basically just, well, it's just showing you kind of where he was going, and suddenly he comes out as as conservative, and just the backlash that happened then. People accusing him of being racist, misogynist, completely failing, as I said, the Town Square test. So that's Stephen Lawrence. And
the Town Square test is a wonderful one. We all have to remember that one.
Yeah.
When I first put up the Warren Farrell video, which highlighted the violence and the intolerance and the outright inhumanity of feminists in Toronto at that protest, I had people who knew me when I was living at Kingston message me and ask me things like this. Why do you hate women? Why do you hate your mother? Literally, they jumped from the fact that I'm putting these videos up there to claim that I hate my mother.
Yeah.
It's like,
well,
there's
a lot of people.
There's no link there, but feminism has allowed them to draw that link. The ever-present ambience of feminism creates a link between any form of highlighting or showing the dark side as being proof that you hate your mother. Yeah.
Well, people assume that the word feminist and the word woman are synonyms. They're not.
Right.
Not at all.
Yes.
Yeah,
feminism plays on the fact that we all want to please our mothers, and that's where its strength lies, really, underneath all of it. Sorry, I've got Mia here. Hello, say hello. That in fact is the root cause as to why I'm with the Liberty Bells and started doing what I'm doing, because I've always found that people make excuses for their mothers while they don't make excuses for their fathers, and then I think that then translates into feminism.
Interesting thought.
Yeah.
Maybe you could develop that thought for us in one of your episodes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're on an hour in.
Shall we wrap up so Natty
we
can
should
get
wrap up. We're an hour in now, and you got any final comments, ladies?
No, just ladies. Philip Davies is still around, but at this moment in time, we're just waiting. We're waiting for the hustings on the first week of June to happen, and then you'll hear about that in the near future after the election.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We'll be going to Shipley.
The
Liberty Bells
will
will
be
be
Shipley.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thanks again. Thank you everybody for watching, and tune in again next week, 2:30 p.m. London time, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we'll see you later. Thanks, ladies, and thanks, viewers.
Bye-bye.